Dudats. Welcome to the podcast you've been waiting for. Great perspective and exclusive interviews.
It's a hard job for those guys because it's happening fast.
The kind of Saints insight and fun commentary you won't get anywhere else.
We've got plenty of technology to speed things up.
It's time to kick off your Been There, Done That Saints podcast, where we hand it off to our host, Mike Nabors, and Super Bowl winning linebacker, Scott Shanle.
Proud of these guys.
With the second choice in the 2006 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints select Reggie Bush, running back, USC.
My, oh my, Saints fans, you want to feel old? That was 13 years ago. Yeah, Reggie Bush was drafted by the New Orleans Saints 13 years ago. Well, a guy who played with Reggie Bush and actually had 1,655 more rushing yards, Pierre Thomas, he's our guest this week in our Been There, Done That podcast. Pierre talks about his journey to the Saints, his relationship with Antonio Pittman, the draft pick back when he was drafted, who he beat out. And he also has some good insight on that 2011 game when he was knocked out early against the San Francisco 49ers in the playoffs. Now, Saints fans, off the top, I got to give you credit for this. You said after the no call against the Rams, you wouldn't watch the Super Bowl. Well, you didn't. You actually watched the NFL draft more, which is amazing considering the Saints didn't have a first-round pick. Per the NFL, the top 10 markets watching the NFL draft, New Orleans was second, only trailing Nashville, who hosted the event. But I'll bring in Scott Shanle. Last time we talked, partner, I know you're not a big fan of watching the draft, but what's your biggest takeaway of the draft?
Well, I actually watched more of it than I expected to, but I felt like this year's draft was kind of boring. I didn't feel like the depth was there with big name guys later in the rounds. Usually you have a lot of big name guys sliding late in the rounds, and you're interested to see where they go. This year it was pretty much trying to figure out where the quarterbacks were going to go. The Missouri quarterback, Will Grier from West Virginia, obviously going to Carolina, was kind of interesting. But outside the top 5 picks, really not a whole lot of excitement to this year's draft.
Did it hurt Nebraska broke its 56-year drafting streak, which you were a big part of, obviously?
Yes, I got to be honest. That did hurt a little bit. That was a long streak broken. Last year, our quarterback got drafted to Jacksonville, but it's been trending in this direction. Sad to say, because the last couple of years, one player I think each year. But hopefully, Coach Frost can get it turned around. And you need talent to win games. And the last few years of the NFL draft has shown Nebraska hasn't enough of that.
Producer Justin Thomas, what stood out in this draft for you?
I kind of agree with Shanle. It was a little boring. It was somewhat predictable, but also some surprises. I only watched, or I should say, kept track of the first day and a little bit of the second day. So usually that's when all the fun is, and then the rest happens so fast, no one really cares. But
yeah, I like how they mixed it up, though. They moved locations. I thought Nashville did a good job. Looked like a fun place to be. And it's always fun seeing old players. You know, Shanley's old teammates, Jari Evans and Deuce McAllister, represented the New Orleans Saints. We'll get to the Saints draft in just a second. But I thought this was the highlight for me. Punter Pat McAfee representing the Indianapolis Colts. And, of course, the draft is in Nashville, kind of throwing this at the Titans fans in attendance.
Hello, Nashville. I'm not going to say a single word about the Tennessee Titans record against the Indianapolis Colts because I was a punter, and there's no reason for me to talk about that. With that being said, we did not punt much against the Tennessee Titans, so you probably have no clue who I am to begin.
Shanle, I think Jason Witten is out of the Monday night booth. Let's bring in Pat McAfee. I think he'd be a great addition.
I agree. I think Pat would be great. Obviously, he knows the game. He's around the game. But to provide that comedic relief would be pretty good.
At least put him on the sideline or something. That was outstanding.
I would love that.
Yeah, he does a great job on the radio. I mean, he's a character for sure. Well, let's get to the draft for the Saints. They didn't have a first-round pick. They didn't have a third-round pick. But I thought, given that they didn't have many picks, you start with Eric McCoy. They traded up once again, the 16th time Sean Payton's traded up since he's been the New Orleans Saints head coach. Then in the 4th round, they trade up and get a speedy safety out of the University of Florida, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. And then their late picks, Swaquan Hampton, a Rutgers safety, Alize Mack, a tight end from Notre Dame, and Caden Ellis, I believe, a linebacker from Idaho. So what stood out about this draft for you, Scott?
I just think they did a great job, even with the limited amount of picks, and there's not a whole lot of interest. When you don't have a first-round pick, not a whole lot of people for the fans to get excited about. But I think if you don't even show the names of the players they drafted and you just look at the positions they drafted, I thought they added depth to key positions they had to. Chauncey, I'm a little bit familiar with him. He trained here at Michael Johnson Performance in Dallas. He was one of those guys who he's a Swiss Army knife. He can be a DB or he can be a linebacker. I mean, he's big, he's got athleticism. And you see those two guys drafted in the 4th and 6th, safety bodies, but really versatile when you think of Dennis Allen's defense, bringing safeties in instead of linebackers, but guys who can play in the box and tackle well.
You know, Kurt Coleman didn't work out at the safety position for the New Orleans Saints. That's a young secondary for New Orleans, but Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, to me, to get him in the 4th round was kind of surprising.
Yeah, he was a very productive player at Florida. And the one thing I like about Chauncey, I had his buddy Vashawn Joseph, who went to the Bills as a linebacker, and I talked to those guys a lot about their scheme that they ran in Florida, and it sounds a lot like what Dennis does. There's a lot of man blitzes, a lot of pressures, so I think he'll be able to play relatively soon based on his knowledge of the defense.
Yeah, before we get to Pierre Thomas, you want to stick around for that. Pierre Thomas, the longest interview we've done so far in our Been There, Done That podcast, really reminisces about his career with the Saints that really was unpredictable and set the tone for a lot of players in the Sean Payton era who weren't drafted but made the team over drafted players. So he talks about that and so much more. But the last thing I want to get to, I thought a need for the Saints was to help Michael Thomas at wide receiver. They didn't have a lot of picks, I get that, but they didn't draft a wide receiver. And they're free agents. They picked up a couple wide receivers, Deontay Harris out of Assumption. You got Texas wide receiver, Lil Jordan Humphrey. But are you worried about that wide receiver position at all with the Saints, Scott?
I'm not as much for one main reason, and that's the signing of Jared Cook. I think having Jared Cook at tight end is really going to help Michael Thomas more than anybody. But you also have to remember Cameron Meredith, they signed him last year. They're going to give him another opportunity. He was banged up and injured last year. I think with the number of guys they have at wide receiver, they like their production out of those guys opposite Michael Thomas. Obviously, it's hard to find a guy like Michael Thomas, but one of the guys, like you said, Lil Jordan Humphrey, every time you watch him at Texas, this kid is a big-bodied receiver who, if he can smoothen out some of his routes and get a little more explosive in some of his routes, he might be a surprise undrafted free agent.
Well, Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis have definitely found their fair share. One of them is Pierre Thomas. We'll get to him in just a second. But, Scott, what is your biggest concern position-wise? Is there anything that stands out? Because I know the offseason isn't completely over in terms of making moves, but it's mostly over. I mean, the free agency is come and gone for the most part, and you have the draft. Every team has a need that they can't fill. I mean, you can't fill all your needs. You try to fill them as best you can. But is there any glaring position for the Saints team kind of moving forward that you're worried about?
Well, I don't know if I have a position where, a couple years ago it was we need a cornerback. We definitely need a corner. Then it was we need a tight end. Then it was we need a defensive end opposite Cam Jordan. The great thing about this team is I don't think there's any glaring holes where guys can't be great players and help them win a championship. I think the one thing the Saints maybe told everybody is they're disappointed in their safeties and their play. When you think back to last year, not a whole lot of big plays made by the safeties. Obviously, you talked about Kurt Coleman was a one-year deal, and he's gone. I think they're looking to upgrade that safety position, and they added depth to the offensive line, which I thought they really needed to do.
All right, time to bring in this week's guest. He's a proud Chicago native, a proud alum of the University of Illinois, a Super Bowl champ, the Saints' 5th all-time leading rusher, and the 8th most touchdowns in the history of the New Orleans Saints. Ladies and gentlemen, we bring in Pierre Thomas.
Thank you. I like how y'all got the applause.
Exactly.
Big crowd in there. Big crowd in there.
That's right. Well, listen, we really appreciate your time, Pierre. You're via Chicago today, aren't you?
Yes, and we have a beautiful day today. I'm shocked.
Okay. All right. We bring in Pierre Thomas from Chicago. And, I list all your numbers, and we're coming off another NFL draft. And you're another prime example of why the draft is an inexact science. I mean, you led the University of Illinois football team in rushing for 3 years, and they didn't invite you to the combine, and you weren't drafted. To me, that shows the process is a little bit flawed, right? What happened? Why weren't you drafted, or why weren't you invited? Just to me, it often doesn't make sense.
Well, as you mentioned, being the leading rusher. But I was the leading rusher, but I wasn't the guy. They had somebody in front of me, great player. I think he was a little bit better than me, if you ask me, just versatile. But I showed up more than him. I was always the underdog. I never was looked at as that starting guy until they got me on the field for the first time to prove myself. But at University of Illinois, when it came down to the pro day, I didn't put up good numbers. I'm not a good test taker, but I knew how to play the game. You put me in the game, I know how to perform. But you have me go out here and run these drills as a test, as a time, I might not perform the way you want me to, or I get looked at. And that's what I noticed at the draft go over. And when it comes down to it, that's not the game. The game has nothing to do with my 40 time. The game has nothing to do with how I cut or anything. I mean, yes, that's good to look at and see what that player or that person can do. But when it comes down to it is, can they play the game? So I guess that's what the NFL looked at more, was more of, can he cut, can he catch, or can he, how is his speed? Is his 40 time or 4.2 or 4.4, whatever? I mean, no, mine wasn't. I didn't put up shocking numbers. I put up numbers which I can do. I guess it just shows the NFL and everybody else, it really doesn't matter what numbers you put up. It's matter, can you play the game or not? Do you have the toughness, the adversity, the desire to win and to be hungry and to be successful? But hey, I tell you one thing. I wouldn't change anything of how I came into the league. I'll be the underdog to show everybody that I can do certain things, because that image or that trail opens up so many doors for other people.
Yeah, you obviously are very confident in your abilities to come where you've came from, not being drafted, and to accomplish what you did. And you probably had options, obviously, looking into which camp you wanted to play for. Why on earth would you go to a camp that had Deuce McAllister, Reggie Bush, Aaron Stecker, and they drafted Antonio Pittman out of the Ohio State University? I mean, you had to be confident going in there thinking you had a chance.
Well, in the beginning, the New Orleans Saints was not on my radar. The teams that were more on my radar and into me during my pro day at the University of Illinois was Pittsburgh Steelers, Minnesota Vikings, the Patriots, and it was Miami. Those were the teams that was interested in me in college during the pro day. And then when it started getting closer to the draft, I started to hear about the Saints. And then my agent at the time reached out to me and told me, hey, do you remember a guy named Greg McMahon? I said, yeah, he was my special teams coach at the University of Illinois. He was like, well, he's been telling them about you, and I think you should go there. And I'm like, well, why do you think that? He's like, well, I'm going to be honest with you, Pierre. And I mean, it kind of goes to my agent of leading me towards this decision. He was like, it's always good to have an inside guy. He can tell you what you need to learn and what you need to know. You have somebody who knows you, and you can learn as much as you can. Maybe you land on a team, maybe you don't, but at least you get some insight that's somebody that you know from college. And I said, you got a point. And as you mentioned, Reggie, Deuce, Antonio, and Stecker, honestly, those guys wasn't in my mind until I made that decision of, okay, I'm going with New Orleans. Only thing that was on my mind is I do have an inside guy, and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to learn as much as I can. But also I'm going to show everybody why I should have been drafted, or why you shouldn't pass up on guys who might not put up big numbers, but if their film shows that they can play the game, give them a shot. So that's what I did.
Pierre, your story, I think a lot of Saints fans listening to this podcast are starting to hear over and over resounding theme is we had a lot of underdogs on our team, and that's what made it special, is guys who had a chip on their shoulder, worked well together, and did all the little things it took to win. When you were in that camp, I remember, I'm going to share a story with you, Pierre. I remember we had a scrimmage in Jack Stadium in Millsaps, and you caught a little flare pass. And I think the entire defense took an angle on you, and you made everybody miss. And I remember going over the sideline and telling the guys, man, that kid can play. And everybody nodded their head in agreement. Was there a moment in that first training camp or your time in the NFL early on where you said, you remember telling yourself, I can play at this level and I can do this a long time?
There were, to be honest with you, Scott, man, I'm gonna let you know right now, that weather almost made me say, I don't know how long I can do this.
Nobody knows. Nobody has any idea what that was like, I tell you.
Man, that's the only thing that had doubt. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, it was the going against, the guys that I've seen, and especially stepping into a different level, the next level, the highest level of that game, and seeing the size of these guys and other guys like yourself and Willie Whitehead. When I first seen that guy, I was like, there's no way. There's no way I'm going against him. But when we put the pads on, it was like a whole nother demeanor, a whole nother attitude. It's like, yo, you're going to show up right now. Show up. Show these guys that you can play here and that you deserve to be here. So it was more of earning respect for the guys who already been there, who've been in the league for a lot longer, and the coaches' respect, and guys who are just coming into the league. That was more of my concern. And once I start getting the feel for it and getting hit by a couple of you guys, I got used to it. Now I got a chance to see what it feels like and what it tastes like just to get hit and to be in it with you, with the professionals, the guys who's been in there for a couple of years or more. So it took some warming to getting up to, but once I got used to it, yes, I can agree to say that at that point, I was like, I can be here. I can see myself remaining in this league for a long period of time, as long as I stay healthy.
Well, you had a lot of veteran guys like myself on your side, and I'm not sure people understand just what the odds are for an undrafted running back to beat out a fourth-round draft pick and have a team cut a fourth-round draft pick. That's kind of unheard of. And, to this day, I share that story with a lot of people when they ask me about Coach Payton, what he's like as a coach. And I just tell them, hey, Coach Payton always said, we're going to keep the best 53, we're going to keep the right 53. And when he did that year and he cut Pittman and kept you, it told all of us guys on the team that, man, Coach is serious. If you just do what he wants you to do and you can be reliable, dependable, you're going to be a Saint. And I think your story gave a lot of guys confidence in Coach Payton as a coach. Do you remember going to that first cut date? Did Coach Payton or any of the coaches, man, give you an idea that you were going to make the team, or you just no news was good news for you when the first cut came along?
I didn't know the process. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how that was going to run. I didn't know what to look out for. I just knew that I thought if I get a phone call from someone, that means I didn't make it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or no, I did make it. If I get a phone call, I did make it. They was going to let me know that you made it. I didn't know if you didn't get a phone call that you made it. And this whole, I remember the last preseason game, I made it to the final, to the final cuts, and I didn't receive a call. And I'm just like, I'm down on myself. Like, man, I gave it my best. It hurt. I started packing up all my stuff because I drove down to New Orleans. Because the reason I drove, when a lot of guys that I came in with that year was like, yo, why did you drive? I said, because I'm making this team. And it was like, you sure about that? Because they brought it up saying, hey, they did draft Antonio Pittman, man. It was like, you might not make this team, bro. You might be driving back to Chicago. We goof off in the locker room, they talking smack. I'm like, man, forget that. I'm making this team. You guys are not going to get in my head.
That's great. I always wonder, Pierre, that's why I asked you, because obviously you're undrafted. I was 7th-round pick, 11 picks away from being undrafted. I'm the same way. I had no idea how the cutting process worked. I had no idea about the 53-man roster. And so when I showed up to the first regular season week, and everybody's like, "Hey, you made it, all right." I'm like, "Yeah, I assumed I made it the whole time." I mean, like I had no idea. So that's the funny part of the business.
Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't know, man. That's the crazy part. At least they should give you a heads up. I think at least give somebody a heads up because I didn't know what to expect. Like I told you, I'm packing, getting ready to drive back to Chicago, and I'm just thinking like, darn it, this is a long drive back to Chicago.
Yeah.
And then Greg McMahon called me and say, "Hey," I said, he's asked me, "What am I doing?" I said, "I'm packing up, getting ready to leave soon. I'm probably gonna leave out here tomorrow." He was like, "What do you mean leave?" I said, "I didn't make the team." He was like, "Nobody called you or nobody told you?" I'm like, "Told me what? That I didn't make the team?" He was like, "No, that you made it. He was like, "Your A better be at practice bright and early in the morning. We got a meeting at 8:00 in the morning." I'm just like, "Man, you better not be messing with me, Greg." He was like, "Pierre, he was like, if you trust me, if I don't see you in the morning, you're gonna get fined." I said, "Okay."
You know what's funny, Pierre, is there's so many stories that you and Lance Moore, frankly, set the tone for in the Sean Payton era. I mean, Scott asked you the perfect question about really that's one of the calling cards for Sean Payton is he gives a lot of players chances. But I talked to Willie Snead a few years ago, and he told me, he was kind of like you guys, you and Lance and so many others after you, where, you had to earn it during training camp. And he said that Sean Payton called him and he said he thought that was the first time Payton had ever done that. And I asked Lance Moore, and Lance said, "No, Sean Payton didn't call me." So that story kind of makes sense with me. You heard about it. You and Antonio Pittman are kind of always tied in this franchise. I don't know if you know this. I actually did some research. Antonio Pittman's now a firefighter in Ohio now. Only lasted in the league for a year. But I didn't know how that dynamic worked during training camp with you and Antonio Pittman. It's almost like quarterbacks competing. You have a lot of competition. But how did you guys deal with the competition during camp? Because that must have been pretty intense.
Well, Antonio, don't get me wrong, Antonio's a good guy. I never had a problem with Antonio, and we were actually roommates. We were roommates at the Hilton Airport. Antonio was a good guy. The only thing I say that probably hurt Antonio was he didn't want to do special teams. And once you're a rookie, no matter what, if you've been drafted or not, it doesn't matter. You still have to show that you can play the game at all positions. If it's special teams, offense, or special team is defense. If you're a defensive player, you still have to do special teams. He didn't really want to show up. He just wanted to play his position, and that was it. So I think he was sold that he already got a sealed and solid spot because he was drafted. But like you guys mentioned, and Scott, you mentioned, Sean is not about that. Sean is not like that. He's not that type of guy, and he showed that. He stood behind his word, and what he says, like, I'm going for who plays the best, who wants to be here. And I kept trying to tell Antonio, like, look, man, you got to get on the special teams, because I'm not the type of person who hates. I know we're going for the same job and the same position. I look at it as if I get you at your best, that's perfect, because the thing is, I get to compete with you with your best, because I'm going to put my best out there. And if you're not giving me your best, then it's going to be kind of hard for me to give my best. I don't feel like I would be giving my best if I don't get out of your best. So my job actually during that time was to teach Antonio Pittman, because I picked up on the offensive playbook very quickly. And I was in the position, and I had my position coach at the time was George Henshaw. And he pulled me off to the side, because every time we was in the RB room meetings and going over the plays, he's noticed that I was picking it up and noticed that Antonio was having an issue with picking up the plays. And he just pulled, after we were done and getting ready to go to practice, he just pulled me off to the side. Hey, can you teach Antonio, the plays? And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, why do you want me to teach him? We should be learning this on our own. And it's like, because most people think, well, I'm competing against him, coach. Like, why would I teach somebody I'm competing against? If he don't know it, I should deserve the job. But I don't think like that. I'm not like that. I'm not that type of person. I look at it as, if anybody needs to learn, I'm going to help them, no matter what. Because no matter what it is, I know what I'm doing, and I want to make sure you know what you're doing too. Because I feel like nobody's going to beat me out of anything that I try my hardest for, that I'm motivated and determined to get. I believe in myself and what I can do. So I don't have no problem teaching someone at all. I didn't have a problem with teaching Antonio, and I started teaching him the plays of how I know how to learn it. And I think he started to pick up on it. But what really got me to beat him out was special teams. Me showing up all the time, busting my butt, and every special teams position there is. So that's what got me the position over Antonio.
Interesting. You talk about being the bigger person. That seems to always prevail, whether it's football or whether it's life. We had Deuce McAllister on a previous podcast, and he fully admitted that Ricky Williams didn't help him at all when he came to New Orleans. But even though he wanted to beat out Reggie Bush, he helped Reggie Bush. You had both of those guys in the same meeting room. You practiced with them. You played with them. How did both Deuce McAllister and Reggie Bush help you, or did they help you that much when you first came in the league and really once you established yourself?
Well, I was more of the quiet one, if you want to say, in the room. I didn't do too much. I didn't say too much. I just sat there and listened. And the way that Deuce helped me by, helped me out with certain plays, especially when we was in practice. If he sees something wrong, he'll mention it. He'll say, look for this, look for that. But another way Deuce helped me out, but he not in person, was me watching his film, watching Deuce. And just also watching his film when he runs and when he did it in practice and in games too. I looked at his vision. His vision was far beyond so many people that I've seen. Deuce can find a hole before it's there. He sees the creation ways before it's there. I mean, I say in my past, before I got to the league, I had a little bit of that, but it still needed some detail work. And me learning from Deuce, just watching his film and watching him as he moves, and sometimes when he talks about certain plays, I see what he's talking about because I watched film on him. So I see what he sees and I understand what he means about hitting certain holes or watching certain linebackers to pick up certain protections or looking at certain protections. So he helped out a lot, more than he imagined or he knows, of helping me with my game, especially with my vision. And Reggie helped me out so much of being a younger guy, of showing me, how to work hard and how constantly to keep pushing yourself, especially in the weight room. Reggie was a hard worker in the weight room to get himself prepared for a game. I mean, the guy, he works out tremendously in a nonstop manner. I mean, he's devoted on his body and getting his body in shape and getting himself out there. And also Reggie motivated me to want to get my hands better, want to learn how to be a receiver, because he was our scat back as well. As we all know, they used us in different things. I wanted to be versatile. I wanted to be used all over. I wanted to be that guy that can call on to be a scat back. I wanted to be the guy that can call on to run run the ball through the tackles. I wanted to be the guy they call on to make us a big block when the game depended on it. So I wanted to be versatile. I wanted to learn everything. And same thing with Deuce. He taught me blocking schemes that I just paid attention to him. It's not more of verbal. It's more of just watching him and seeing how he takes on certain blocks. And I just usually can compare it to my game and to my skill. I mean, some things I had to adjust because of my skills, but learning from these guys, I mean, it helped me further my career. So I'm very grateful that I got a chance to play with these guys.
Pierre, that's a big part of having success in the NFL is emulating a veteran player. And I work with linebackers here at Michael John's Performance in Dallas every year before the draft. First thing I tell them is get to know a veteran, and if the veteran thinks you're there to take their job and they're not willing to help, just watch them from afar, because you can survive a long time by watching successful guys and become an approach pro ahead of time. Before you got to the NFL, growing up, did you have a favorite player or somebody you tried to emulate?
Yeah, it was Barry Sanders. Barry Sanders was one of my favorite, also along with Walter Payton.
Two pretty good guys to emulate. You mentioned it before. You talked about versatility. that was one of the things that all of us guys noticed about you right away is you could run between the tackles, you could run outside, you could catch the ball. You were a great kickoff returner. And those are the things that help guys earn roster spots. To me, when I think of Pierre Thomas in a Saints uniform, I think of the ultimate screen master, especially in the red zone. I can see Pierre running screens in my sleep. I saw you catch so many screens. If you had one play, Coach Payton's going to let you suit up for one game, and he's going to let you call the play. What was your favorite play you ran when you were a Saint?
Oh, man. I would have to say besides the screen, it was our ride game, our ride Bob. It was a ride 34, 35. It allows me to open up my shoulders, turn and go downhill and just make a cut or a move. I like to run. Everybody talks about the screen game. I mean, the screen doesn't work without everybody playing their part. That's just how it goes. I mean, yeah, I did my job of catching a ball, like just getting to my position, moving with the lineman. Yes, that has to sync together. So that's why I'm always talking to those guys. Always, Stinchcomb, Jari, Carl Nix at the time, all those guys. I had to Bushrod. I had to talk to these guys first to see their movement. Goody. I had to see their movement and see how they move when it comes to the screen. But I can't take the credit for that. That's those guys up front make that happen a lot too. But my favorite was the ride bobs. I love those plays because it gets the linebackers to actually move. If you open up your shoulders on the first initial step, Scott, you should know about this because that's what you guys usually watch. Are our shoulders correct or our eyes?
I'm watching your eyes initially and then your shoulders. Wide turn, I'm turning to run wide. You're downhill, I have to step downhill. But I agree. You were good at that play because you glided and you were very smooth and patient on the play.
Yeah, and that's what I've learned, through practice. When I talk, and I usually talk to you guys. I used to see how you guys read. I talk to Vilma a lot. I talk to Fujita. Scott, you was a little quiet. You was the guys who was just chilling. No, but I always talk to the linebackers, all the linebackers, just to see and get and hear how you guys read, because maybe our opponents read the same way. And if they do, maybe in my footwork, I can get them to overrun the hole which I'm trying to create and put them on the fullback or the lineman to better our chances with this play. So I love the ride Bob because just like you said, you watch your eyes. So I turn my eyes outside, like I'm running outside, and I turn my shoulders outside. And then that second step is putting me into that position, going that direction. But that third and final step, I hook back over and I go straight downhill, which already got you guys going outside because you guys sprint to get past certain defenders, maybe the lineman or maybe the tight end or a fullback to get on the outside because you guys got to maintain it, keep everything inside. So, and it's an inside run scheme. So to get you guys to go out, I mean, that was my whole thing. And I did the research and I told coaches all the time, I said, hey, and this is, I used to try to yell at, I never yelled at any of the coaches, but I used to come at them and say, hey, we need to start running bobs. I used to say that all the time in our meetings to say, hey, all my position coaches to tell them, run bobs. We're better at them. Our offensive linemen love them. Those guys are too big to be running to the outside. They're not that fast, but some of them were. Got to give it to a lot of those big guys. They were fast enough, but I felt like they were more stronger and they can go forward a lot quicker. So that ride Bob, their footwork isn't all the way out to the outside where they have to sprint and run. They're just going straight up. They take a step out and go straight up at an angle, which give them more power and more capability to get on their guys a lot faster and set themselves up for a perfect block.
Pierre, Shanle was quiet because he was saving himself up for the podcast. He just wanted to kind of let it go.
I kind of noticed that now.
I was gathering all that information so I could go to the media world and be a successful media man.
Scott obviously respects you. Your teammates had a lot of respect for you. And I want to bring up this game, and I know it's a tough one for you. It was a pivotal one in the Sean Payton era. Of course, your playoff game in 2011 against the San Francisco 49ers. We had Roman Harper on earlier in the podcast, and he said this about this game, and it's not a criticism of you, but it shows your value to the team. Here's what he had to say about that game.
And they freaking knocked Pierre out the first series. I think if Pierre doesn't get knocked out and fumble on the first drive, we go down and score. It's a total different ball game. But it was like we were playing from behind, and man, we battled our butts off, dude. And you don't get that chance. And you look up and you think like, oh man, we might get back, and that team's never the same.
I hate to bring up a bad memory, but it shows your importance to this football team. Just talk about how frustrating that game was. I know that had to be, because Shanle has said it before in this podcast that I know you guys felt like you were the best team in the NFL that year.
Oh, yeah. We always talk about that. I talk to Sproles about that a lot, too. We still talk now, and we Sproles keep bringing that up. Like, man, every time we talk about the Super Bowl or something, we bring up that year. That year, we definitely could have took it all the way. And just to talk about that situation, just leading up to that, it brings back a memory of something I was trying to preach to the coaches a lot, especially my position coach. I didn't want to go to every coach, and I didn't want to go to the head coach with this. I preached it a lot to my position coach. And I started to notice this, during the season, during our run, that we were very predictable. I mean, I understand that Sean and the coaching staff have their strategies, and they put us where we need to be placed. But I felt like if you're one of the teams that's on the top, everybody's looking at you. Everybody's looking at your schemes. They might like your plays. They might want to take a few things. That's what I feel like the NFL does. They take from each other. They use it against each other, and see what fits with their organization, with their offense or defense, however it goes. But I noticed that we were very predictable, especially with our personnel. When I go in, sometimes it's a screen. I hear it all the time. Watch the screen. So they know that I'm good at running the screen. They know that they like to use me running the screen. When Mark was in, or Ivory at the time, run, they load the box. I mean, they're not yelling out screen. They load the box. When Sproles was in, they spread out. They didn't look for, or they would be cautious for the draw. They knew exactly for the running backs, exactly kind of where we were coming off of. And I started to pick that up. I started to notice that, and I just brought it to my position coach attention that we need to change it up. Let Sproles run the ball. Let Mark or Ivory, be a scat back. They showed you they got hands in practice. They can catch the ball. They can block. And, use me at any time. Let me run the ball a little bit more, or let me be a scat back as well. However you want to use me. I can do it all. But for these other guys, let them learn, let them do different things, change us up. And when it came down to that game, when I was knocked out, it was a hit that, to be honest with you, yes, it was a helmet to helmet. He hit me on the side, but I didn't see him right away. So I didn't get a chance to protect myself. I tried to protect myself as best as I could after I caught the ball, and he got me good. And I can't blame him for a shot like that, because who knows when. I'm just surprised these shots doesn't happen often in the NFL, because of the way, we play the game, because I didn't know where he's going to put his hat. He didn't know where I was going to put my hat. So it happened. But after it happened, Sproles and Mark, and Sproles had to play certain plays that I was meant for. And he never got any of those reps in practice. So if you don't give that guy that type of rep and you put him in the game and you tell him, well, you got to try to learn it just by watching. Yeah, that can work. But sometimes some people need that practice. of running that play just in case something happens. And that game basically showed, well, you didn't let these guys run any of the plays that you made for me. So when you put some of these guys in the game to run the plays that I ran in practice and you never gave them a shot, Mark or Sproles, they might not perform the same. It might be a little different. They never ran it before. They don't know probably what to look for. So that kind of pissed me off that we didn't do that. And I felt like that year, if we have done what I got to stress for a couple of weeks, we would have took it all the way. Because I was in a locker room and they told me I couldn't come back out, and I'm just watching the game and I'm just pissed because I see it. I'm like, okay, they never ran that play. Some of them did, and they stepped up. I'm not going to say they didn't step up, but they stepped up to the plate. We played a great game. We were in it, but I mean, the end result showed.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. That's exactly why we're doing this podcast, to bring Saints fan stories like that. Pierre Thomas, we're almost done with you, but we have one more segment left, and I think it'll be the most entertaining. Justin, our producer, what time is it? You know what time it is. We don't script these shows. Pierre Thomas is thinking in Chicago, what have I gotten myself into? I have no idea what this is. This, my friend, is more likely 3 hypotheticals about your career and about football. I'm glad you mentioned all the running backs you played with. The great story about that playoff game, because it fits right in with my first hypothetical. Pierre Thomas, more likely, if you had to be stranded on a desert island for a month with one of your former running backs with the Saints, who would it be? Deuce, Reggie, Sproles, Chris Ivory, Aaron Stecker, or Mark Ingram?
We're stuck on a desert island?
Yes.
Man, that's so random. Where did you come up with this? I don't even know how to answer that. Like, what else is on the island, man? I need to know what else we got on the island.
Well, it's got to be a guy that, you know.
You're going to be a guy. I can't have a girl on the island?
No. This is more likely. We create the rule.
I got you.
Now, Pierre, we've said this before. You can either go with a guy who's going to keep you entertained, or maybe you find a guy who's going to be resourceful and help you survive on this island.
Pierre didn't expect this when he woke up this morning.
I wasn't. Man, this threw me off. But I will have to say Sproles.
Wow.
Aaron Sproles.
Why?
He's a funny guy. A lot of people I don't know too many people that knows. He's a funny guy. He's a genuine guy.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to take away from any of the other guys. They're all good. Mm-hmm. Everybody has their way. I just know, and Reggie knows this. He's a little Hollywood. I told him that several times. But no, they're all good. I still can stay in contact with all of them. But Sproles, I don't know. I feel like we kind of relate a little bit more. Like with our background a little bit, we had a little bit more in common. We talked, and he is very resourceful. He's a hard worker, doesn't complain, gets the job done, and does it. And that's what I liked about him. You know, he doesn't complain. He knows how to work with people. He knows how to adjust well and listen to criticism. He takes that on very well, and he's a guy that you see he'll fight for you.
Well, you adjusted very well after that question. That was good stuff. 2 more likely. Our second more likely. I don't know how much you follow the league anymore. I don't know how much you miss playing football, but if you could trade places with one running back in the NFL and have a couple more years in the league, who would it be right now? Of any running back in the NFL, if you could trade places and kind of jump in his spot the next couple of years, who would it be?
Oh, man.
How about that? We don't pull punches on more likely.
I haven't really, like you said, I mean, I'm kind of glad I'm retired. I'm liking a retired life right now. I'm not getting hit, you know. My body feels good.
Yeah.
I don't know if I really want to switch with these guys. You know, I see them all getting banged up. But I guess you can say, do I have? Okay, let me ask you this question. What's your question? Do I have his?
You have
like his style, his own technique, or is it my?
Yeah.
It's you just playing in that scheme.
Oh, okay. That's a good one.
Wait till the next one, but I'm just saying. We have one more for you. We test you on these shows, these podcasts.
I was going to say if I had the same skills as that person, I would say Bell, Le'Veon Bell.
Okay, all right. You like watching him play, huh?
I like his patience. Yes, I really do like his patience. I like watching him play. He hits, he plays, he can catch. He's a good running back. I like him.
Okay, we'll take that. I'll let you off the hook there. Last one for more likely Pierre. He's thinking, when am I going to be done with this? If you wore number 23 for the New Orleans Saints, if Pierre Thomas could have 23 of anything in this world, what would you pick?
If I could have 23 of anything in this world.
You're a budding entrepreneur too, so think about that. You can have 23 of anything in this world.
They all have to be the same?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
but
wow.
It could be anything, though, too. That's the trade-off.
That is an interesting question. 23 of anything I want in this world.
You have the perfect number for this question, too. I mean, you could be, if it's single digits, it's sometimes easier. But you running backs or you go offensive linemen, we have Stinchcomb that, too. It gets a little bit harder the higher the number, right?
Yeah, I was going to say you got this 78. Woo,
yeah,
that's a big number.
Right.
23 of anything I want in this world.
Yeah.
What would it be? You know what I want?
What?
23 years of nonviolence.
I like it. Wow.
23 years of nonviolence. How about?
I like it.
That's what I want in this world.
That's a first.
Justin Thomas, can we bring back the applause for maybe the best answer to that question so far? Can we? There we go. Yeah, I like it. Well, that is more likely. Before we let you go, I want to talk to you about what you're doing now. I know you're working on a lot of really entertaining business ventures. What would you like to talk about that excites you the most right now, Pierre?
Oh, all of it. All of it. I mean, why just stop at one of them? But the one I'm more excited about, and it's something I want to bring, is that lounge in New Orleans. But if there are some people out there listening and you have property for sale or lease, holla at your boy. I am looking in the warehouse district, the CBD area. I would love to bring something classy, elegant, sexy to New Orleans. It's something I want to give back to the city, to the people. I want people to come out and just enjoy themselves. And also something for us players, where we could come back to. And Scott, this is something I want to tell you because it's not just for me. I want us players to be investors in this. So I want guys to be a part of this because it's always something for us because we're always something out there. We brought that city, that whole Who Dat Nation, something very special. And I feel like we need to all have something out there that we can always come back to, always enjoy ourselves, always bring friends and family to and say, hey, this is our place. This is all of us players we put in and we made this happen. So that's something I really want to get going.
Well, I did the more likely. So can I be invited when you launch this club, or you just don't like me anymore because I threw those questions at you?
What do you mean? We're gonna put the podcast in there.
I like that idea. Well, listen, Pierre, you're always a great interview as a player. You brought stories I don't think any Saints fan has ever heard, and you really typify what the Sean Payton era has been about. You earn it, and you're rewarded for it. So I'm really happy for everything you have going in your life. And we can't appreciate more your time. And I know Saints fans love the stories too.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, guys. I'm glad, you guys reached out and, get me on the show. And I wish you guys nothing but the best of luck and keep killing it. I know y'all doing a great job. Keep it up.
Appreciate everything, Pierre.
There's no problem at all. Thank you guys for having me.
Hard to get anything by Pierre Thomas. He nailed more likely. Kept him a long, long time in this Done Dat podcast. But Scott Shanle, what really stood out for me, Pierre Thomas, were the stories. I love the stories about how he tried to help Antonio Pittman in training camp, but also that 2011 game where he was knocked out early. That game has really stuck with him, like he stuck with a lot of you guys.
Yeah, I think obviously for him being on the offensive side of the ball, that's something he really noticed and something he feels like was the difference in the ball game. We all do that. The defensive side of the ball, we can say the same thing. Maybe we shouldn't have been zero pressure, bringing all sorts of heat, leaving Vernon Davis one-on-one matchups with Malcolm, because that was a tough matchup for him, being a young player at the time. So we as players, we all go back. We second guess not only ourselves, but sometimes the scheme of some of the things and the way they turn out. But it was an interesting topic for sure by Pierre.
Yeah, and that's what we try to give you on this podcast, are stories that you haven't heard, perspective that you haven't heard. And what we also give you is a little extra. It's time for Lagniappe. Justin Thomas, I know it's another big weekend for you, but what's your Lagniappe this week?
I have two things, actually, and they both go hand in hand, so to speak. So there's only one player left from the 2000 draft. You probably know who I'm talking about, some guy named Tom Brady. And that's because this weekend, Sebastian Janikowski, announced his retirement after 19 years. The dude is he is the longest tenured, or was the longest tenured, Raiders player in team history. I thought that was interesting. So it's down to one last person, Tom Brady, and I guess we'll all be wondering how long he's going to continue playing. Seems like everyone thinks he's going to retire soon, but it's great to see a guy like Seabass with a long career. You know, hate to see people retire and leave, but he was one of the best.
I covered Janikowski at Florida State when he came on the scene, and I'll say this about Janikowski. He's always lived up to the hype. Huge recruit out of high school. He was terrific at Florida State. After all those wide rights, you know, he helped to win a national title, and he was a party guy too. You wondered, that guy's going to get his money in the NFL and just, you know, waste all of it. Then he lasts 19 years. I don't know what's more impressive, frankly, that he was drafted as early and lasted 19 years, or that he almost outlasted Tom Brady, because, you know, it's you got to give him a lot of credit for that.
19 years. And also, like you said, I think he was drafted like 17 overall. That's insane for a kicker.
Yeah.
So like you said, a lot, a couple years ago with Aguayo, when he was drafted, I think that pressure kind of got to him. So Seabass could have easily fallen under that pressure. But like you said, he lasted 19 years.
The Raiders have been lucky with kickers because they drafted Ray Guy in the first round too. So that kind of worked out as well. Scott Shanle, what you got?
Obviously there were a lot of things that were in the draft. As time plays out, we'll know whether or not the Giants drafting the quarterback from Duke was the right way to go. But I'm gonna go away from football, and how big of a loser I felt like after this Game of Thrones episode. I said earlier, I don't watch Game of Thrones, and I never let social media dictate or validate what's going on in my life. But I tell you what, when social media, it was blowing up the other night, I felt like the kid on the outside looking in. Like, I had no idea what was going on. And you know what I did that night? I finished my Cobra Kai Season 2, Johnny Lawrence and Daniel LaRusso. That made me feel a little bit better that I've gotten through 2 seasons of Cobra Kai.
I just started that, actually, Season 2.
Is that good? Because I saw the first couple. They were pretty
If you
good.
loved Karate Kid, like for me, I think about being a kid watching Karate Kid, and it's one of those movies that makes me nostalgic a little bit. So that's why I like it. But I think they did a good job. The storylines are good, a little cheesy every now and then. But if you loved Karate Kid, the movie, you'll like this series.
I second that. Wait, so what were you hearing on Twitter? Spoiler alert, I guess. But Shanle, what were people complaining? Because that's most of what I saw. People complaining about the episode.
Well, here's the thing, Justin. I don't know whether they were complaining or they were hyped. I just know there was a ton of Game of Thrones hashtags all over my timeline. And I thought, man, I'm a loser. I'm the only one not watching this right now.
You need to go
I thought people were really complimenting. I saw Christian McCaffrey tweet, "It was the best thing on television ever, no argument." I mean, I saw that across the board that it was good. I don't know, Justin, you're the only one of the three of us that watches that show.
Look, I thought it was a great episode too. There was some minor things, but overall, I enjoyed it. But I was shocked this morning seeing a lot of people were upset with certain aspects of what happened. So I guess you can't please everyone, but I, for one, I loved it.
Well, my lagniappe is stigmas in the draft. Kyler Murray, boy, I give that kid a lot of credit. It looked like he was going to play baseball. Then he says, you know what, I'm going to go to Oklahoma for another year. And then he just wins the Heisman. And then he's the first player ever to be a quarterback drafted under 6 feet tall. And as a guy who's under 6 feet tall, I'm proud of you, Kyler Murray. Way to represent us, big guy. And you know what? Spud Webb, when he won the slam dunk contest, that was huge. You know, Jose Altuve, little guy, won the MVP in the American League. That was nice. But Kyler Murray being drafted, being under 6 foot at the quarterback position, that's pretty impressive. And it breaks the stigma that probably should have been broken a long time ago. You know, Doug Flutie caught a lot of flack for his height and stuck around football for a long time. And then, of course, you had Drew Brees help out and then Russell Wilson. So Kyler Murray, you know, really setting a trend in the future of football drafts. But there's another stigma, too. I read about his dad, Kevin Murray, who was also a good quarterback and had to leave school early because of some possible NCAA violations. But Kevin Murray never made it in the NFL, and a big part of that, I think, was because he was a black quarterback. And his college coach, Jackie Sherrill at Texas A&M, said, you know, he coached Dan Marino, he coached a lot of them, and he thought Kevin Murray was as good as a lot of the guys that he had coached and should have played a long time in the NFL. And, of course, that was many decades ago. So I'm glad we're past the black quarterback stigma, and I'm glad we're past the under 6 foot quarterback stigma, Scott Shanle.
Yeah, I'll just comment about Kevin. I know Kyler, being in the same school district. I see Kevin all the time. He trains quarterbacks, and he does a phenomenal job of creating great high school quarterbacks who go on to get Division I scholarships. That's his passion. That's what he's been doing. Obviously, his best project has been working with his son because Kyler has done an amazing job. You talked about his height. The one thing that I'm interested to see with the whole Kyler Murray, I hope he has success. My worry for Kyler is people think it's a great match with him and Kingsbury. That's my worry. I would much rather see Kyler Murray with Sean Payton and Drew Brees or somebody like that, because I'm not sold on Kingsbury. The guy didn't win at Texas Tech. I know he's got this air raid offense, but Chip Kelly went to the NFL and couldn't make it work. I don't know if Kyler Murray going with Cliff Kingsbury and that Arizona team is the best spot for him.
What do you think about a guy who's only played 1 year of college football being the number 1 overall pick, too?
Scares me to death. I played for Coach Parcells, and the more I listen to the Bill Parcells rule about college quarterbacks and what you need to see before you take them high in the draft, I completely agree. It's hard to look at a guy after 1 year because you have one great year. Now all those defensive coordinators are scouting you in the offseason, and can you do it again the second year? You don't get that with any of these guys who just are 1 year wonders. It'll be very interesting.
Well, this was another interesting podcast. We love our Lagniappe. We love having Pierre Thomas on. He was fantastic. Great stories and great perspective from him. If you want to check us out, we're on a lot of platforms. We're on Stitcher. We're on Spotify. We're on Google. We're on Podbean. And we are on iTunes. And we're with you each and every week with a special guest. And, of course, a lot of fun surrounding our guests. For my partner, Scott Shanle, for our great producer, Justin Thomas, I'm Mike Nabors. We'll talk to you next week.